The silence was absolute as Raphael reached out a trembling hand towards the black stallion's muzzle. For a moment that felt like an eternity, the entire world held its breath as the untamed beast, which had thrown generals and humiliated nobles, lowered its majestic head and gently touched the calloused palm of the orphaned boy. But to understand how we arrived at this impossible moment, we must go back to the beginning, when the sun still scorched the dry prairies of Dust Bowl and the winds howled through the dusty streets of that forgotten village. Raphael had arrived 3 days prior, his bare feet bleeding, his stomach rumbling a painful symphony of hunger. His eyes, too large for his gaunt face, caught every movement, every opportunity to snatch a piece of bread or a drop of water. Nobody knew where this boy, perhaps 15 years old, with unkempt black hair and clothes that looked more like rags sewn together out of necessity, had come from. It was at Hope's Tavern that he first heard about the Black Stallion. A group of burly men, their hands scarred, smelling of sweat and leather, spoke in hushed tones about the wager that had drawn adventurers from across the region. "1,000,000 gold coins," muttered a grizzled cowboy, shaking his head in disbelief. "Colonel August is offering a fortune to whoever can tame that hellish beast." "Beast?" retorted another, younger, with a fresh scar on his right arm. "That's not an animal, it's pure fury. I saw Captain Montenegro go flying like he'd been hit by lightning, 3 broken ribs." Raphael cowered further into the dark corner where he'd managed to hide, trying to absorb every word. His hungry mind calculated. 1,000,000 coins. It would be enough to buy a small house, food for years, maybe even a chance to study, to become someone in life. "The beast appeared 2 months ago," continued the older cowboy, wiping the beer foam from his mustache. "Nobody knows where it came from. Black as night, strong as a storm. The colonel tried first, of course, proud man, used to getting everything he wants. He lasted less than 10 seconds on that demon's back." The younger man laughed bitterly. "Then it was General Carvalho's turn. He came from 3 towns over with his soldiers and his military techniques. The horse didn't even wait for him to mount properly. 1 buck and boom, the general was eating dust." "And what about Lord Rodrigo?" interjected a third man, until then silent. "That self-important nobleman with his silver spurs and imported saddle. He even brought a wild horse expert from Austin. Result? The same old failure." Raphael swallowed hard. If such powerful men with so much experience had failed, what chance did a hungry boy like him have? But hunger has the power to make the mind calculate impossible risks, and that night, as he lay on a pile of hay behind the tavern, Raphael made his decision. The next day, while the sun still painted the horizon orange, he headed towards Colonel August's property. The mansion sat atop a hill, surrounded by wooden fences and iron gates. Raphael had never seen such opulence. Well-kept gardens, thoroughbred horses grazing in perfectly delineated paddocks, and in the background, a special corral reinforced with double wooden planks. That's where the Black Stallion was. Even from afar, Raphael could feel the animal's presence. It wasn't just a horse, it was a force of nature imprisoned. Its black coat gleamed like obsidian under the morning sun, and even standing still, it radiated a wild energy that kept the other horses at a distance. "Are you lost, boy?" Raphael turned, startled. A middle-aged man with graying hair and a neatly trimmed mustache watched him curiously. He wore expensive but simple clothes, and there was something in his eyes that didn't match the arrogance Raphael expected from a colonel. I came because of the wager, sir," Raphael stammered, trying to find courage in his words. Colonel August studied him from head to toe, noticing the bare feet, the patched-up clothes, the evident thinness. His face softened slightly. "How old are you, boy?" "15, sir. Almost 16. "And where are you from?" Raphael lowered his eyes. "Nowhere, sir. I'm an orphan." An uncomfortable silence settled between them. The colonel seemed to be wrestling with himself, as if weighing unspoken words. "Listen carefully, Raphael," he finally said, surprising the boy by using his name, though they hadn't mentioned it before. "That animal has already thrown men 3 times your size. Trained men, experienced men. I don't want to have your death on my conscience." "I won't die, sir," Raphael replied with a conviction he didn't even know where it came from. I need to try." The colonel sighed deeply. There was something in the boy's eyes, a quiet determination mixed with a hopelessness that touched something deep within his heart. "Very well," he finally said after a long pause. "But first, you'll eat, and take a bath, and put on decent clothes. I won't allow anyone to approach that animal in a weakened state." Raphael blinked, surprised by the unexpected kindness. "Why are you being kind to me, sir?" The colonel looked away, contemplating the black stallion in the distance. "Because I was also once young and desperate, and perhaps I've been wrong about what it really takes to tame that creature." In the following hours, Raphael experienced luxuries he had never imagined. A hot bath, clean clothes, a full meal that filled his empty stomach. Mrs. Martin, the colonel's housekeeper, treated him with a maternal affection that brought tears to his eyes. Meanwhile, the colonel watched the boy with growing curiosity. There was something different about him, a quality that transcended his frail appearance. Raphael didn't speak much, but when he did, his words carried a precocious wisdom, seasoned by suffering. "Tell me about the horse," Raphael requested during lunch. The colonel leaned back in his chair, his eyes lost in recent memories. "He appeared one stormy night, 2 months ago. My men thought he was a lost horse, perhaps a runaway from some distant ranch. But when they tried to approach, well, they quickly realized they were mistaken." "What's so special about him?" "All his strength, sir." "It's not just strength, boy, it's intelligence. That animal thinks, plans. He observes every movement of anyone who approaches and anticipates the next step. It's as if he understands exactly what we intend to do." Raphael chewed slowly, processing the information. "And everyone tried to subdue him by force? How else would you break a wild horse?" The colonel frowned. "Reins, spurs, a whip if necessary. That's how it's always been done." "But if he's intelligent," Raphael murmured, more to himself than to the colonel, "maybe force is exactly what he's rejecting." The colonel stopped eating, intrigued by the boy's words. By the afternoon, a small crowd had gathered around the corral. Word that someone else would attempt to tame the black stallion had spread quickly, and though many viewed Raphael with skepticism, curiosity was stronger than disbelief. "That kid won't last 5 seconds," someone muttered in the crowd. "It's cruel to let a child try," another said. But Raphael didn't hear the comments. His eyes were fixed on the black stallion, which in turn observed him with a penetrating intensity. There was something in that gaze, a silent communication that transcended words. The colonel approached, carrying a saddle and a set of reins. "Are you sure about this, boy?" Raphael nodded, but when the colonel offered the equipment, he shook his head. "I won't need that, sir." "What do you mean?" "If he rejects force, maybe he also rejects its symbols." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the crowd. Riding a horse without a saddle and reins was already risky with a docile animal. With this beast, it seemed suicidal. The colonel hesitated. "Raphael, I admire your courage, but this is crazy. At least use the reins to have some control." "Trust," Raphael said softly, "isn't built with control." And then, under the tense gaze of dozens of people, Raphael opened the corral gate and entered. The black stallion didn't move. He remained standing in the center of the space, muscles tense, nostrils flared, but his eyes never stopped following the boy's every move. Raphael stopped 10 feet away. The crowd was absolutely silent, as if afraid that any sound might trigger a tragedy. "Hello," Raphael said softly, only to the horse. "I know you're scared." The animal snorted, pawing the ground, but didn't attack. "I'm scared too," Raphael continued, taking a small step forward. "Afraid of failing, afraid of being just another one who doesn't understand you." Another step. The stallion shook its head, whinnying softly, but remained in place. "You know what I learned living on the streets?" Raphael continued talking, his voice carrying a serenity that contrasted with the tension in the air. "I learned that freedom isn't taken from anyone, it's offered." Another step. Now they were only 6 feet apart. "Everyone who came before me wanted to break you, to force you to obey. But I don't want that. I want to invite you." The black stallion slightly tilted its head, as if listening not only to the words, but the heart behind them. "If you let me get on your back," Raphael said, now only 3 feet from the animal, "it will be because you chose to, not because you were forced. And if you choose to throw me off, I'll accept it and walk away." For a moment that seemed eternal, boy and horse stared at each other. The stallion could see something in Raphael's eyes. There was no greed, no desire for domination, no fear disguised as bravado. There was only a raw honesty, a vulnerability that touched something deep within the animal's wild soul. Then the impossible happened. The black stallion lowered its head, a subtle gesture, almost imperceptible, but for those who knew how to read the language of horses, it meant acceptance. Raphael slowly extended his hand, and the animal allowed him to touch its muzzle. The skin was warm, the fur soft, despite its wild appearance. For a moment, they felt the connection that exists between all living creatures when fear is replaced by understanding. It would be natural, at this point in our story, to pause for reflection, just as those who gather in town squares to listen to storytellers, or those who subscribe to a channel to continue receiving accounts like this, knowing that each narrative carries a lesson that echoes far beyond the words. The crowd watched in absolute silence as Raphael, with slow and respectful movements, placed his hand on the stallion's back. The animal tensed momentarily, but didn't move away. "May I?" Raphael asked in a whisper only the horse could hear. The answer came in the form of a profound stillness, a silent acceptance that spoke louder than any whinny. Raphael gently propelled himself upwards, mounting the horse without saddle, without reins, without anything but the mutual trust he had built in minutes of honesty. The black stallion remained still for a few seconds, feeling the boy's light weight, getting used to the sensation of carrying someone who didn't intend to dominate him. And then, in a move that surprised even Raphael, the animal began to walk. Not the furious gallop everyone expected, not the kicks and jumps that had thrown off everyone else, just a smooth, elegant trot, as if presenting his new partner to the crowd. They circled the corral once, then again. The stallion seemed to be enjoying himself, displaying his natural grace without the furious resistance he'd always shown before. The crowd erupted in applause and cries of disbelief. Men who had bet against the orphan boy now watched him with a mixture of respect and astonishment. Colonel August remained motionless, his eyes shining with an emotion he couldn't name. After a few minutes, he signaled for Raphael to approach. "How?" he asked simply. Raphael slid smoothly from the stallion's back, which remained at his side like a faithful friend. "He didn't need to be tamed, sir," Raphael replied, stroking the animal's neck. The colonel shook his head, still processing what he had witnessed. "The bet was to tame the horse," he said slowly, "and you achieved something that seemed impossible." "I didn't tame anything, sir," Raphael replied, stroking the animal's neck. "We made a deal." The colonel studied the boy's face, seeing a maturity that transcended his age. "1,000,000 gold coins," he said finally, "a fortune that will change your life forever." Raphael looked at the black stallion, which snorted softly and nudged his shoulder with its muzzle. "Actually, sir, I'd like to make a different proposition." "Different?" "This horse wasn't meant to be owned by anyone. He's free by nature. If you agree, I'd like to stay here, working on your ranch, taking care of him and the other animals. In return, I can forego the reward." The crowd murmured in surprise. Giving up 1,000,000 gold coins? It seemed insane. The colonel frowned. "Boy, do you know what you're saying? With that money, you could buy your own ranch, your own life." "I know, sir, but I learned something today. Sometimes true wealth isn't in possessing things, but in belonging somewhere." Raphael looked around, seeing the expressions of disbelief and admiration on people's faces. "I spent my whole life without a place to stay, not knowing if there would be food the next day. Hunger teaches many things, but the most important is the value of simple things: a roof, a meal, a purpose." He turned to the colonel, his eyes shining with a serene determination. "If you give me work, a place to sleep, and food every day, I promise to care for all your animals as if they were family. And I promise that this black stallion will never need to be tamed by anyone again." The colonel looked at the horse, which remained calmly beside the boy, then at the crowd watching the scene with fascination, and finally back at Raphael. "And if I said you could have both, the money and the work?" Raphael smiled for the first time since arriving at the ranch. "Then I'd say you're more generous than you deserve, but I'd still choose to stay here. Money runs out, sir, but a true connection, that lasts forever." The colonel extended his hand, and Raphael shook it firmly. "Welcome to the family, Raphael." The crowd applauded again, but this time it was a different applause. It wasn't just for the impossible feat of riding the black stallion. It was for the recognition that they had witnessed something greater: the transformation of an orphan boy into a young man, and the discovery that sometimes the most powerful force in the world is kindness. In the months that followed, Raphael became a living legend in Dust Bowl. His skill with animals was almost mystical, and ranchers from all over the region came seeking his advice. But he never charged for his help, always remembering the words that became his motto: "Trust isn't bought, it's built." The black stallion, which was named Hope, became his inseparable companion. Together, they roamed the prairies, free as they always have been, united not by reins or force, but by a genuine friendship born of mutual respect. Colonel August, in turn, discovered that his ranch had never been so prosperous. Raphael not only cared for the animals with love and dedication, but brought a practical wisdom that transformed the entire ranch. More importantly, he brought a lesson that the colonel would carry for the rest of his life: that true power lies not in dominating, but in inspiring. And so, as the sun set over the prairies of Dust Bowl, painting the sky gold and red, Raphael rode Hope across the endless fields, two free spirits who had found in each other not only a companion, but a family. The story of the orphan boy who tamed the black stallion without using force spread throughout the region, passed down from father to son, gaining new details with each telling. But those who were present that day never forgot the true lesson: that sometimes what seems impossible becomes inevitable when we approach challenges not with arrogance or force, but with humility and understanding. Raphael learned that the hunger of the body can be satisfied with bread, but the hunger of the soul is only satisfied with purpose. And he found his in caring for those who, like him, had been misunderstood by the world. Hope learned that true freedom is not in the absence of bonds, but in the conscious choice to connect with those who respect us for who we are. And all who witnessed that impossible day learned that miracles don't descend from heaven ready-made. They are born from the encounter between hearts that recognize each other, even when everything around insists that they are too different to understand each other. The story ends, but the lesson remains. In a world that insists on solving everything through force, sometimes the greatest revolution is to extend an empty hand and hope someone trusts enough to touch it. And when that happens, when two souls recognize each other beyond appearances and prejudice, something more precious than 1,000,000 gold coins arises. The hope that in the end, we can all be tamed, not by force, but love.